Good morning, friends. Today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Asha Chand, who's Associate Dean International at University of Western Sydney. She is a well-renowned journalist and academic of Fijian origin, who's been working, uh, I'll say effortlessly, basically for 35 years, and she has been shining with amongst the Indian diaspora and the Fijian diaspora here, with 35 years of experience in industry, academia, journalism, newsroom management, and now international relation management, particularly at higher education sector. Uh, how does it feel, Dr. Asha Chand, to be recognized as India's Nav Rattan?
Thank you so much. Namaste, Amitji, and hello to all your listeners and viewers as well as readers. Thank you so much for having me here today. Look, I feel it's like a normal day. I feel really motivated, and I think this award has is sort of making me think about my position in this world, on this earth, and I'm really thinking about my strategies in terms of what can I do, what more can I do and give back. And like you said earlier, education is really powerful. It can change lives, it can change livelihoods, and it can be a dose of miracle, I'd say. I mean, my own life back in Fiji was one of a struggle, I'd say, because of poverty, if I can use that term. But through education, I have been able to change my own life trajectory, of course with help from a whole lot of people. But in a similar way, now that I've got the Nav Rattan, I think through the power of education, and most importantly through the power of journalism, I'll be able to make a difference to this world, or perhaps even create a different world. There are so many things we can do, and journalism can be a very powerful institution, if I can use that term, to really create a different world and a different mindset. We live in a very dynamic and evolving environment, and of course, providing opportunity to people, or young minds, especially young people who are not given that opportunity to study and to be able to understand the world around them, but they are still endowed with so much richness in terms of where they come from, who they are, their family background. We can't really rule that out. So those are the possibilities I am here to explore and learn from myself. Education is a learning phase for me always and will always be, because once you stop learning, you stop doing things. Thank you.
Very well said, Dr. Chand. Now, you mentioned Fiji, and I've worked in Fiji for 3 years. I had very close interaction with students from the 14 Pacific nations that come, and often they look up to people who are Fijians or Pacific Islanders and who have earned a name outside Pacific Islands. Uh, you said your life was full of struggles, right? The poverty and everything, but yet you were determined to get an education. If I'm not wrong, you moved to Australia in 1998. Uh,
Yes,
but
actually, yeah,
yeah,
on the 7th of February at midday, we landed in Australia, and I can't forget that. Arrived here with three small children, my husband, and three suitcases. That's all we brought. But look, going back to Fiji, growing up in Fiji, although we were poor and lived in a state of really working very hard. I used to sell vegetables by the roadside to be able to support my family, as well as to buy basic things for school. But I don't regret having that life. I think those early stages were very formative in my life, and I
mm,
know how to value time, how to
yeah,
value money, and that's basically has become part of my DNA. And also my life in Fiji, I from memory I'd say they were one of those most happiest times in my life. We were so carefree, and I think Fijian people still are very carefree, fun loving, and
yeah,
there's so much to learn from Fiji. It may be a dot on the world map, but it
yeah,
is endowed with richness in so many ways. And of course, as a journalist, as a educator, when I reflect on my own practice and I reflect on my life and look at the fault lines and where I could have improved, where I can go back and do things, and I think about, wow, Fiji, it has got so much to give to the world and to its people. So yeah, it's a beautiful place, um, John Paul once described it as the paradise, where
Yeah.
the world should be, and I think
Yeah,
there's a lot to learn
one
from
of the
history as
things
well.
one of the things I learned in Fiji was that we don't want to be billionaires, we want to be bullionaires, happy all the time. So,
Yes.
but reflecting back on your time, you were a journalist in Fiji Sun and Fiji Times, two of the main papers there. What was the situation in newsroom at that point of time? And if I'm not wrong, you were one of the few journalists who saw the Queen as well when she visited Fiji. So, what was that experience? As a young journalist reporting for
But
Fiji Sun and Fiji Times.
I started reporting straight out of high school, so I was very young. And again, I'm being very honest here. When I was working, when I was studying, I really wanted to be a teacher. So I applied to join the teaching fraternity or to learn about teaching at university level, but I got rejected because I was 17 at that time, and the intake was for 18 plus students. And so I stayed in school for one more year, and I thought, okay, I'll become mature 1 year older and I'll get higher marks, and then I'll achieve something. I was so worried about being married at such a young age because that was happening to other girls my age in the village. And so the following year, there was a vacancy for a cadet reporter at the Fiji Sun, then Fiji Sun. And I also, my teachers and my careers teachers advised me, and my history teacher, especially, who was a Dutch woman, she said, apply. And I applied and I got the cadetship at the Fiji Sun. And at that young age, because I think I used to sell vegetables and negotiate the prices, I also negotiated with the owners of the Fiji Sun, who were white men. And I've met white men in the professional context for the first time, and I freaked out about that interview process as well. And I negotiated, and so I was able to join the Fiji Sun after I finished my higher school certificate, which is more like equivalent to what we do here in Australia.
Hmm.
And although I was offered a place at the university, we couldn't afford to pay for the scholarship was just for the education side, not the accommodation and all, and we couldn't afford that. And if I had decided to go to university, I would have my younger sister, would have had to miss the opportunity to go to high school. So I said no to that, and I started working. And my salary at that time was $35 a week. But
Oh.
I didn't know much about journalism. So some of my career highlights then were like, at that time the prime minister of the country was Ratu Sekamise Semara, who was a high chief.
Hmm.
And in the 1982 election campaigning, my father used to accompany me on this, and my brother used to go with me on the campaign trails because it was difficult for a woman from a village to be out and
Hmm.
about. And I remember walking up to the prime minister and just approaching him directly for a copy of his speech. And those were the days of typewriters and all.
Hmm.
And he was such a humble man. He turned around and he was wearing a sulu, which is more like a sarong with a pocket. And
Yeah.
he took out the speech he was
Speak.
carrying with him, and this was the speech he was going to use for other campaigns during the campaign trail. And he gave me a copy of his speech. And then, of course, I got pulled up by his media people who said, "You shouldn't have done this. This is not the done thing." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know that. I apologized." And
Hmm.
in a similar way, when the Queen visited Fiji, and I was still a young reporter, I hadn't had any kind of training. And I always tell my students in my journalism classes, you are so lucky to get the level of training that you are getting so
Hmm.
that you do the right things, because journalism today is about really being sensitive about cultures, about background, so many things.
Hmm.
But anyway, back to the story of the Queen. So when the Queen came, and of course for me it was a big deal to see a white person, and of course the Queen was the Queen, and I thought, oh my God, I can't even understand what she's saying. And so I pushed everyone to get closer and closer to her, and her personal security guard came up to me, and he thought, what the hell are you doing? There is a protocol here. And he literally picked me up and put me away. And then, of course, that wasn't a deterrent for me because I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. And I said, no, I'm here to get a story. And and then I was able to hear her, and I got an exclusive out of it, so that was my good thing. But the sad reality was the police officers from Fiji came and warned me, said, "Stop behaving like this." I said, "What am I doing wrong?" And they said, "You are saying something." I said, "No, I haven't said a word. I haven't done anything wrong." And so, of course, they didn't know. I didn't know. So it was all journalism at that time for me was learning as much as I could. I was like a sponge soaking it all in, and learning by doing. And of
mm,
course, I have, from my own experiences, decided that it's so important to make journalism teaching very practice based as well. And so I
mm,
teach my students a lot of that in terms of they have to, excuse me, go out and actually
mm,
conduct interviews, do the research, be on the ground, live those experiences that their subjects are experiencing, to be
mm.
able to get the best version of truth when they're telling their stories.
Yeah. Now, in 2018, you were recognized for your journalism and research at the House of Commons in London with the Mahatma Gandhi Pravasi Samman, which is a big achievement, kind of an award which is given outside the Indian government sphere, but it's given by a very prestigious NRI Welfare Association. They have been working tirelessly to unite the NRIs, maybe create awareness about the Indian culture outside India as well. And in 2019, you were recognized with Hind Ratan, the Jewel of India Award, and now in 2023, you have been awarded with the Nav Rattan, the Nine Jewels Award. So these awards kind of show a trajectory that there is more awareness and acceptance about the NRI's hard work in India, within the Indian community, the main land India. If we talk about, when you were in Fiji, did you ever get a chance to go to India for research or holiday?
No, I couldn't afford to be really honest with you. And
Yeah.
India was a far-fetched dream for me. I only
Mm,
saw India through Bollywood movies. And again, being able to see movies was a big challenge because it was a question of affordability. Much more later in life, when we were working, we were
mm,
able to afford a television set. And when we had electricity in the village, we could do all of that. But talking about the NRI movement, the non-resident Indians, it's a huge movement in India, and you know, coming from India yourself. And of course, when people migrate from any country, their umbilical cord is buried in that country. They are so deeply connected to the country,
mm,
and only a migrant, only someone who has left their country of birth, or the country where they've spent their childhood and their adult life, will be able to understand this, because it's about your own personal experiences, and it's more to do with your emotional journey.
mm,
And I think the NRI movement is doing a marvelous job, and
mm,
they are really committed to two countries. Of course, they do a lot in terms of where they live, and, like, their country,
mm,
the home where they, the place where they've established their home,
mm,
and are working there, paying taxes and all. But the NRIs also do provide a lot of remittance, and they do a lot of work back in their country of birth to be able to improve livelihoods and life. And I
mm,
really salute that work, and I'm so happy that I'm part of that uh, collective, and I'm
mm,
able to network with them, and also able to give back in every way possible. And again, I'm not limiting myself to thinking about, yeah, okay, just do this thing for Indians
mm,
and India.
mm,
Do this for anyone, any country, any person, any child. And because we talk about change, and we can, when we talk about things like change, we can sort of look at the great Mahatma Gandhi himself. He talks
mm,
about be the change you want to see in the world. So, of course, we
mm,
want a great world. We want a better world, a much more peaceful world where diversity is accepted, where individuality is accepted. So, all these NRIs are doing a great job. And you talked about the award itself. Here, it was again an honor and a prestige to receive
mm,
all those awards. These awards have sort of become like an inspiration to do
mm,
more, and connect with like-minded people, and connect with people who have done so much more than what I'm capable or what I am doing myself. Like when I was at the event in Delhi in January or on January 25, I met with so many people who have achieved so much. There was this a doctor from South India who had established a dialysis program whereby he's reaching out to people in the villages who are not able to access any kind of medical facilities. And he's going out in the villages and providing this level of care. And it's a very personal thing when people get very sick. Sometimes they don't even want to talk about their ill health or their medical condition. So having respect for that and providing that in the privacy of people's homes is a big job, and how, what a great initiative. So I really salute all the other recipients, and I respect the fact that they have done so much more, and I'm learning from them. So I feel really privileged and blessed in that sense that I'm put in that sort of space where I'm learning from others and learning from what they are doing.
Now, Dr. Chand, before we end, one of the things I wanted to ask you for a very long time actually is that you started your academic journey in Australia in 2003, right? And then this is 23. So 20 years, 2 decades. Uh, you have worked with and mentored a lot of people of color. That the term that we use now. Uh, Indian origin or South Asian or maybe non-Anglo Celtic background, budding journalists. Do you think that the newsroom in Australia is changing? I'm not talking just about the public broadcasters because that's expected from them, but the mainstream news room. Do you think it's changing? What's the feedback from your students when they come back to tell you, or what should be, or what should Australia do to make Australian newsrooms more diverse?
Well, there was again to start off with, I know you mentioned that let's not look at the public broadcasters, but the public broadcasters too have changed or have had to change. Just recently as late last year, one of my former students of Aboriginal background was the first woman appointed as head of Indigenous News at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Um, and Suzanne Dredge is her name. And I taught her, she was one of my first cohort of students when I started teaching at Western Sydney University. So it's taken a long time, I'd say, for that to happen.
Yeah.
And it's all about acceptance as well. And diversity in newsrooms is a big challenge. And I think all the media organizations, not only in Australia, across every platform around the world, is noticing that the world is made up of all kinds of people, and so change is happening for the better. And of course, media engagement, like people's engagement with the media, that's a big issue. The fact that media diversity is a big issue, lack of engagement, lack of media literacy is a huge issue as well. These are the challenges that we face, that journalism faces, that all the media platforms face. And so everyone is, I think, now coming to a realization that something needs to be done. And I think it's also about having those voices as well as faces on the screen that are relevant to the audiences as well, and also going out and doing the stories about these communities, about these people who are no longer going to be pushed out into the background, because the entire media landscape has changed with digital platforms coming in, and the power of the media is not in the hands of big corporations anymore. It's in the hands of ordinary citizens.
Yeah.
But as journalism educators, we need to also talk about fact, truth telling, and what is fake news and all that. So we have to step in and step up in terms of how we teach, what we teach. How do we teach ethical journalism? How do we deal with questions of objectivity? What is it? Is objectivity any more relevant because we bring in our own biases into stories? What are the things we are willing to accept? And how are we going to sort of learn and teach? And my students feedback, just recent, I don't post much on social media as such, but I thought I owed it to the NRI society when I came back from India. So I posted a little note on LinkedIn about the award. and so many of my former students who are all across the globe. And these are
Mm,
students of color, students of all sorts of background. And
mm,
of course, I started looking up their profiles. I was curious, and they are running in, operating in such high-profile positions. And they don't necessarily have to be journalists. They are bringing a lot of change to the world through what
mm,
they have learned in my classrooms or in our classrooms, and look at the kind of ripple effect they bring into the world through the
mm,
education they have received. And every person who is in my classroom is important to me, and I really value that. And I also acknowledge the fact that I also learn from them. So media diversity is a huge issue, but I think the dynamics is shifting and changing.
mm,
We as educators have to be very aware of how we teach, and I'm
mm,
also learning. So I'm introducing some new subjects into the curriculum, whereby I'm taking my students out into the communities to get them to really understand the local communities and how they live,
mm,
what are their challenges, what are the solutions to the problems. Solutions learning is very important. And of course, constructive news is very important. It's not always a case of if it bleeds it leads. It's
yeah.
also about really going out into the communities and telling
Mm.
the real stories.
Now, before we go, are there any people in your life that you would like to thank for this award? And what's your message for the NRIs of Australia, especially young people? How should they give back to the community like you have been giving back for the 35 years? And you've been contributing not just to Australian community, but Fijian, Australian, Indian, Australian community as well. So what's your message, and who are the people behind you, the strength?
I first of all thank God for the life that I have, for the breath of life that I have, and then of course my parents, my late mother, who was very instrumental in pushing me to get an education. My grandmother, who is no more, was an inspiration to me. She couldn't read or write, but she kept pushing me to, she used to help me pick mangoes and go to the, neighboring villages to sell mangoes with me. So of course her, and of course all other families. My husband has been very, very supportive. So have been my children and my grandchildren, and the whole world. I think, you know, the whole community, the whole world, the whole universe has been really helping me and pushing me. There are too many people to name, but they know who they are, and I know who they are. Every person I've met, I've learned from. I think that's education itself. The fact that you learn from the people you meet and all. And the message to the NRI group: I salute the work you are doing, and I'm willing to join in and make a contribution, a meaningful contribution in whichever ways I can. And to people who are migrating and all, look, this world is a big place, or we can call it a very small place, because with technology and everything else, we are all so deeply connected. The message to any newcomer into Australia is don't give up hope. When I arrived here 25 years ago, I felt so overwhelmed. All I did was sit and cry. As soon as I arrived at the airport, I just broke down and cried. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I've left my job, I've left everything. How will I survive? Meaning, how will I support my three young children, and my husband was in a sort of similar state. But then we used what we had. Make use of what you have, start off with
Mm,
that, and other things will fall into place. Don't give up, and believe in yourselves. It's very important to have that level of belief that, yeah, you can make it all work. And you don't necessarily have to have the highest or paying job or the most recognized job in the world. It's how
mm,
well you make use of what you have, how happy you are. People in the Western world, and I think generally in this world today, are trying to find happiness, but you can find it within yourself. If you are able to live within your means, do a bit for the communities you are living in, and
mm.
then think of the big universe in terms of the changes you can make, and be the change you want to see in the world. That's could be a starting point. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for that beautiful message, Dr. Asha Chand. And once again, congratulations from the whole Australia Today team for the Nav Rattan of India award. And I do hope to catch up again and talk about Indo-Fijian life and the life in villages, because that's an interesting topic that we have been covering the Pacific for some time now, and we are looking for Pacific's stories of sheer grit and dedication and success. So again, congratulations, and hope to catch up soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.